I know it's shocking to see my face at the beginning of a video, but I wanted to do a little intro to this video because it's a little bit different than what I normally do. I normally produce a video for YouTube and then give you guys the extended cut, but I'm switching it around. I've got a video that I've produced for YouTube coming out in January on PNFs, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And I created a video just for you guys that is a protocol for the ankle only using PNFs. I've found it's been really effective and I wanted to share it with you guys. So without further ado, enjoy. Happy holidays. Happy 2019. All right, let's go. So my friend Monica here has really bad ankles and has struggled with them her whole life. Her balance is really bad, and as you'll see in a minute, they're extremely inverted, and she has had a chronic weakness her whole life. My goal here is to improve the communication between her ankles and her brain, so let's get to work. I've got her on the table and I'm really noticing for the first time how inverted her ankles are. So I'm talking to her about where she might be feeling some pain. And you can see here, especially with her left ankle. So most likely there is some extreme tightness with the tibialis anterior and posterior, and accompanying that weakness with the tendons and ligaments on the outside of the ankle. Really quickly, the way that a PNF is done is that you notice what muscles are tight, you stretch those muscles out, ask your client to activate those muscles, and then once they release, stretch them out even more. So I'm noticing her inverters are really tight. I'm going to start with those. I'm bringing her ankle into eversion. I'm using my palm on the outside of her foot for resistance, and I'm asking her to bring her foot into inversion. And as she does that, she's really only using about 20% of her energy to activate these muscles. And I'm not giving her a lot of resistance. We're just wanting those muscles to wake up a little bit. And once they release, I'm going to stretch them out into eversion even more. Getting your client to do inversion and eversion can be a little tricky. So what I usually do is give her some tactile information, and I touch the inside of her foot and tell her to bring that part of her foot towards the inside of her knee. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to slow things down a little bit and repeat them. So you're seeing the same technique that I just showed you, but from a different angle. Again, just emphasizing that I am bringing the foot out into eversion, asking her to contract the inverters, which in this case are mostly the tibialis anterior and the tibialis posterior, holding that resisted contraction for about 5 to 8 seconds, depending on your school of thought, and then stretching those muscles out once they've relaxed. Whether or not you hold the resisted contraction for 5 seconds or 8 seconds or even 10 seconds is up to you. Try it out with your clients and see what you feel works best. Normally for this protocol, you're going to work through each step on one ankle and then move to the other. But for this video, I'm showing you how to do this same technique for the inverters on the right ankle. So I'm pulling her ankle out into eversion, asking her to contract into inversion as I resist that contraction. And then once she's released, stretching it out even farther. You normally repeat this step about 3 times. So right here, she's contracting, and then as she releases, right here, I'm stretching her ankle out into eversion, and then I'm going to repeat that process one more time. I'm moving on to dorsiflexion of the ankle, which gets a little confusing because the muscles are called the extensors, but they do dorsiflexion. I'm mainly focusing on the tibialis anterior and the extensor digitorum, and there's a couple other muscles in there. But the thing I want to make clear for my client is that they want to move not just their toes up towards their knee, but also their whole foot. So those are 2 different groups of muscles, and you want to make sure that all of them are engaged. So right here, she's already contracting, and right here, I'm stretching out her muscles after she's contracted them. But you'll notice that I started this process with her ankle mostly plantar flexed. And what that does is creates about an 80% stretch to the muscles that you are targeting and having them fire from a slightly elongated state. So when they fire, they are working a little bit harder, and then when they relax, they have to relax beyond their normal state of relaxation. I'm switching my hand position here just because it's more comfortable for me this way, but I want you to notice that her ankles are off the end of the table, and while I'm working on her dorsiflexors, I want to make sure I support the back of the ankle so that the posterior tissues don't get pinched and her knee is not compromised. There is a lot of work that you can do in combination with this technique, but I'm keeping this video simple, and maybe that's a good idea for a video to come. This is a repeat of the third pass again on this ankle. So again, I'm stretching it out, asking her to contract the entire foot and her toes up towards her knee as a resist, and then when she relaxes it, I'm really stretching those muscles out. You can see from this angle the support on the posterior ankle and then the little bit of work I've chosen to do up the tibialis anterior. This is the same technique on her right ankle, and I'm walking her through all the steps again. So I'm pulling her foot down into plantar flexion, asking her to pull her toes and her feet up towards her knee, and then when she releases, I'm really stretching it out. Her ankles were really hypermobile, so I didn't hold a stretch too long in one position. I wanted to pump the stretch a little bit because when somebody is hypermobile, you can definitely overstretch something. So this was a little bit more about giving her awareness and movement than it was about releasing muscles that were really tight. But the effect is still the same. So I'm stretching her foot out, asking her to contract it, which is waking those muscles up. And then once she lets those muscles release, I can play around with her mobility and start to improve the neurological connection between her ankle and her brain. I'm going to repeat what I did with the left leg on the right leg as well, working up the tibialis anterior after I've done the PNF. And if you'll notice, I'm just doing a little quick compression work, and that kind of work is more stimulating than it is inhibiting. And like I said, she is hypermobile, which means she needs a little more stimulation and less relaxation in these tissues. For eversion of the foot, I'm mostly focusing on the peroneus longus and the peroneus brevis. And similar to inversion, eversion is tricky for a client to do, so giving her tactile information again, tapping the outside of her foot, asking her to bring it to the outside of her knee, and then providing resistance as she fires those muscles. The thing about PNFs is that they are mainly designed to help elongate a muscle that is chronically tight. But in this instance, and what we're doing with the ankle here, is waking up a muscle firing pattern that has been a little bit dormant. The muscles around the ankle, as is true for most any muscle around any joint in the body, start to work on a very subconscious level, which means that the awareness around the minutiae and the finite movements that a joint can do are not consciously articulated, so it becomes kind of robotic and automatic response. When we force a muscle or a group of muscles to move in a conscious way that is separated out from its normal activity, their contractile ability improves, and their ability to communicate to the brain where they are in space and what they are doing is also improved. And that's the whole goal with my client here, and her lack of balance and her weakness, and creating a shift in that pattern for her. As a side note, I recommend using your entire palm to do these manipulations with the foot and with the ankle because there's so many moving parts in the foot that keeping all the parts as a solid whole while the ankle is moving is going to produce the best effect. Moving on to the right foot and ankle, I'm running through the same protocol with the everters here. I'm starting with giving her some tactile information about the outside of her foot up to the outside of her knee. And I left this little bit in because even at this point, I still have to take a minute to think about where I want to best place my hands in order to resist her contraction when she goes to evert her ankle. I've got my left palm on the outside of her left foot, and when she goes to evert, I can use that palm to hold her foot as a whole and create resistance. So right here, I'm doing my third round with this. I've asked her to contract, and after she contracts, I'm releasing the foot into a nice long stretch. On to the fourth and final movement of the ankle, plantar flexion. So we're dealing with the flexors of the ankle, mostly the gastrocs and the soleus. So I'm showing her first that I'm stretching out those muscles and then asking her to contract those muscles to give her a sense of what we're doing. Once she's done that, I'm bringing her foot into dorsiflexion, stretching out the flexors or the gastrocs and the soleus, asking her to contract against my resistance. And then once she's released, I am stretching those muscles out, bringing her toes up to her knees. A couple of things to note here. I'm using my left hand to grasp the ankle, and this serves two purposes. My thumb on the top is keeping a nice space in the anterior portion of this joint so that it doesn't pinch. And the other technique that I'm applying is to use my left hand underneath the ankle as well to support pulling the tissues down towards the calcaneus and encouraging that stretch. This is where I really had to focus with my client. She had less mobility with dorsiflexion than she did with plantar flexion. So after she releases that muscle contraction and I stretch those muscles out, I'm simultaneously increasing that myofascial stretch. Same technique here from a different angle, but I want to point out something that I don't think I've made totally clear yet. Before you start the first PNF contraction, you want to stretch out the muscles that you are focused on to about an 80% degree stretch. So for the flexors of the ankle, for the gastrocs and the soleus, I'm bringing her toes up to her knees to a full stretch and then bringing that stretch back just a little bit, about 20%. And then once I'm at that spot, I ask her to contract for the first time. The goal is that each of the 3 contractions should be done at a slightly bigger increment of a stretch to start. So for example, if I can bring my client's foot up to a 90-degree angle into dorsiflexion, I want to decrease that to about an 80-degree angle, perform the first PNF, stretch those muscles out, and then increase that degree so that the second time I bring her foot up into a stretch, it might go to about an 85-degree angle, and then the third time it might go all the way up to a 90-degree angle, in the efforts that the stretch in the end will have gone beyond that original 90-degree angle that she was capable of when we started. So I've switched over to her right ankle at this point, and I've brought her foot up into a stretch, asked her to push her foot down into my hand to contract the gastrocs and the soleus, and then when she releases, I bring those muscles into a nice stretch. So again, just re-emphasizing, every time you repeat this process, the stretch should be a little bit greater than the previous one, asking those muscles to fire beyond their normal capability and waking them up and sending new proprioception information to the brain. Okay, as I'm finishing up these last techniques on her right ankle, I want to review that I've addressed the inversion, the eversion, the dorsiflexion, and the plantar flexion muscles and woken them up a little bit, given her brain a little more information about what's going on, and we're hoping to see a little more balance when I get her off the table and have her stand on one leg. Just as a reminder, this work can be done in combination with a lot of other soft tissue work, so I encourage you guys to explore this work, mix it up, and try it with your clients. Now to put all of this work to the test. I've got Monica off the table and she's standing on her right foot first. I could have hired an actor and she could be acting all of this, but she's not, and this is real, and she's actually got a little more balance. It's pretty spectacular. So go for it. I would love to hear how this works out for you guys.